Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Arise with Sally Goodwin. We had a little bit of a false start where my phone would not rotate to record the way that it generally records. So I had to switch it off and, I don't know, do something and delete what I'd done and then redo. So I'm a few minutes late this morning. A few minutes late, but I am here. I just wanted to say one more time, I got so many messages from so many people yesterday just saying, not to worry. So firstly, I got so many messages from people saying, what happened to the live this morning? And to be honest with you, I wake up at 5 o'clock every morning to take my medication. And I woke up at 5 o'clock to take my medication. Then what I generally do is just lie in bed for half an hour because I can't have anything else for half an hour after that. And then I get up and then I come and do my live. And yesterday morning, I must have woken up and taken my meds and fallen asleep again. And I think I only woke up at 8. So sincere apologies for that. Honestly, when I was mortified. And I woke up to all of these messages saying like, what happened to the live? Where was the live today? And all of that sort of thing. So I really felt very bad about that. Please forgive me for absconding on the live yesterday. The medication that I'm on makes me very tired, a little bit nauseous, not throw up nauseous, but just a little bit nauseous and just very, very tired. So I have to make sure that I get up and do the things that need to be done. I can't just lie in bed all day. So today is Friday. It is Friday instead of Thursday. I hope that you all don't go through your whole entire day feeling as though it is Thursday instead of Friday, because it is Friday today, a beautiful, beautiful Friday morning by the looks of things. And it is the weekend. Good morning, Stu. Lovely to see you. It is the weekend, one day closer to the weekend for most of you. Good morning, beautiful. Good morning, Candace. Lovely to see you all. Thank you all for showing up on Friday instead of Thursday for me, because I got my days completely discombobulated. Good morning, LCB. Lovely to see you too. So today is Friday, so the rest of the day, if for a moment you think to yourself, oh, it must be Thursday because Sally was on live this morning, then you can just be like, no, it's actually Friday. What an amazing day. Not that every day isn't amazing, but Fridays are often particularly amazing. So, welcome everybody. For those of you who are just hopping on, I'm just waiting for a couple of people to still come on. They're still coming on, I can see. And I just want to say welcome very much to Arise with Sally Goodwin on this Friday morning. And a reminder for those of you who have seen my live come up and have thought, oh, let's watch this. I'm generally only on a Tuesday and a Thursday mornings. Tuesdays and Thursday mornings at 7 a.m. is when I'm on. But my recordings are available on my YouTube channel, Arise with Sally Goodwin, my website, sallygoodwin.com, and my Instagram page, which is also called Arise with Sally Goodwin. So I'm fairly easy to find. So you can find me in any one of those places. If you have missed my teachings, if you want to catch up on some of the teachings that I've put across, you are welcome to find me in any of those places. Today, the fact that I'm on a Friday, good morning, Lundiwe. The fact that I'm on a Friday is unusual, and it is purely because I skipped yesterday. So I have apologized for that. I was very upset with myself yesterday. for doing that. Responded to all the messages of people. People are just so kind because everyone was just so worried about me, you know. But I'm okay. I'm still, just need to get more comfortable. I'm still alive. I'm still kicking and screaming. Maybe not screaming, but still kicking. And I'm not going anywhere soon. Okay. So we are speaking about Esther. And one of the reasons we are speaking about Esther, not simply because Esther is a good subject to speak about, but we are speaking about Esther because we are in the Jewish month of Adar 2. So it is the Jewish leap year, as I've explained quite a couple of times in previous of my videos. We are in the midst of a Jewish leap year, and in a Jewish leap year, they don't add another day as we do with the Gregorian calendar. They add a whole nother month. So they've added a month, so they already have a month of Adar, which is the last month of the biblical calendar, and they add another month of Adar prior to that. So we've already had the extra month of Adar, which was the bonus month or the leap year month. We are now in the month of Adar that would have been anyway. And so and Adar is the last month of the biblical year. Now again, if you've watched my teachings previously, and if you have gone onto my website and you've watched my videos on the mysteries of the Hebrew calendar, they're not long, they're short. The mysteries of the Hebrew calendar, the mysteries of the Hebrew alphabet, they're very short, like 10-minute videos, just explaining the very basics, because there's so much that can be said, but the very basics of those things. Then you will know that we're in Adar now, and then from Adar, we go into Nisan, which is the first month of the biblical calendar. And the reason why I want you to pay attention to these dates or these days or these months is because God mentions them in the Bible, but we pass over them or we glance over them when we read the scriptures because they don't apply to us within our Gregorian calendar. But what I want to just remind you is that that was God's calendar, that He originally set up the Hebrew calendar. And in fact, a lot of Orthodox Jews and Messianic Jews will only follow the biblical Hebrew calendar. They do not follow the civil Hebrew calendar because God said in His word that the first month of the new year will be Nisan. So, and then later on, through various happenings, the Jewish people made the first month of the year Tishri. So there's a bit of an argy-bargy around that, and different people follow different things, but there is that just to be aware of. But the point is that when we read the Bible and we read these months come up, we actually need to pay attention to them because they mean something. Nothing in the Bible is unintentional. You know, God didn't arbitrarily decide that things were going to happen at certain times. He had specific and intentional reasons and seasons set aside for specific and intentional things. So the month of Adar then leads into the brand new month of Nisan. So when Adar finishes, the new month of Nisan begins, and Nisan is the new month of the biblical calendar, not the civil calendar. So we stay in 5782, but we go into 5783 in Tishri. I think sometimes, I know for some of you who've been watching me a long time, I think you probably feel like I explain all of that over and over again, and I apologize. But sometimes it takes, firstly, there are always new people join in who haven't heard all of that before. And secondly, because sometimes you need to hear something a few times before it kind of settles in your brain. You know, you hear it once and then it kind of goes, you hear it twice and it's there, but you actually need to hear it said again and again before it becomes something that settles in your brain. And then lastly, on this note, because the question has been raised recently, and people say, you know, so am I Christian or am I Jewish or what am I? You're a Christian. If you're a believer in Jesus, if you've surrendered your life to Him, you're a believer. You're a Christian, you're a follower of Jesus, whatever you want to call yourself. You are only born a Jew or married into the Jewish religion. So just the fact that we pay attention to the Jewish roots of the church is simply because it is so important. It is so important because the Jewish roots of the church, that's where the church started. Jesus was a Jew. The church started with Jesus. The Jewish roots started there. And there has been an assignment of the enemy ever since then to remove the church from from her Jewish roots so that he could leave her with no foundation. And so you're not a Jew. If you pay attention to the feasts, or you follow the biblical calendar, or you're interested in those things, it doesn't make you a Jew, and it doesn't make you a wannabe Jew or any of those things, okay? It just means that you are paying attention to something that was important enough to God that he actually put it in the Bible. You know, that he actually put his calendar in the Bible. That was how important it was to him. And then we took it, well, not us personally, but our predecessors took it and went, okay, no, we're not going to use that one. Do you understand what I'm saying? All right. I get on my soapbox about that one because sometimes I just get asked so many questions about it. People who say, but you aren't a Jew. No, I'm not a Jew. You know, I'm not even a Messianic Jew, because a Messianic Jew is someone who is converted from Jewishness to accept the Messiah and thus become a Messianic Jew. I'm a believer in Jesus who firmly believes that the Jewish roots of the church need to be reestablished. Okay, and with that, we're going to move on to Esther. Morning, Arena. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Okay. Yes, absolutely, Londiwe. Jesus is our firm foundation. Our only foundation. Jesus is our firm foundation. Whatever we do, whatever we believe, whatever we speak about, we stand firmly on Jesus, and we point people directly to Jesus, not to ourselves, to Jesus. Okay. So I explained to you on Tuesday, we spoke about how obedience is better than sacrifice, because if Saul had been obedient in what God had asked him to do, to destroy all the Amalekites, he would not have been left with the Agagites, who were descended from King Agag, who was the king of the Amalekites, who is somewhere along the line. Obviously, some of them escaped, and they then became the Agagites. And the Agagites were, according to Jewish history, very ruthless, clever people. They were robbers and gangs of thieves that lay in wait alongside the less traveled roads in and around the Middle Eastern area, and they stole and robbed people. They also, even the princes and the wealthy people of the time who had armies and people to protect them, were scared of the Agagites, because the Agagites were known to be brutal, they were known to be ruthless, they were known to be vicious, and all that they were after was plunder or gold or riches. So the Agagites had turned out to be not very nice people, and the fact that Saul had not obeyed God fully in what God had asked him to do had left not just the Jewish world, sorry, there's a machi or something, not just the Jewish world, but in fact that whole region had left them basically at the mercy of these roving bands of Agagites that used to steal, kill, and destroy. Sounds a lot like the enemy, doesn't it? So now what has happened is Haman was very active in the king's court. Haman was very wealthy. He had wealth that he had inherited from his father. And in those days, you could buy your position in the king's court. And also because the king, particularly King Xerxes was a warrior king, okay? He was a king who liked to go to war. That's why his territory stretched so far from India to Ethiopia, because he was a warrior king. He was a warlike king. And war costs money. And there is only so much you can tax your people. There is only so much that your people have to give to fund war after war after war, that until they revolt or starve to death because they have nothing left to give you. So kings in those days would surround themselves with princes and noblemen and wealthy people, wealthy men who could contribute to their coffers, so that when they went to war, there was money available to them. And in exchange for that, they would make those men, they would give them very high positions within the court, which would mean that those men basically, the king was the ultimate ruler, the ultimate regent, but he couldn't be everywhere all at the same time. He couldn't make every single decision continuously. And so those noblemen, those noble rulers, were pretty much allowed to actually do what they please, with whom they please, and how they pleased, because they had the king's blessing. And they had the king's blessing because they had money. And King Xerxes particularly, he needed money. He liked to go to war. He liked to win. He liked victory. He tasted a lot of it and he liked it. And he needed very wealthy people around him to make that possible. So he promotes Haman and advances him, and he sets him far above all the princes who were with him. Now, what you also need to remember at the time is that it wasn't like, oh, lovely, so Haman has been promoted to this incredible position. Let's all just celebrate him. Let's all just be like really thrilled for him. This is amazing. Those princes and noblemen, they fought for those positions to the extent that they would poison each other, they would take each other out, they would kill each other, they would accuse each other unjustly of things. So you knew that if you were someone who had reached the place where your seat was above all the princes who were with the king, you had done your fair share of taking out the competition. The competition was not going to be allowed to get to you. You would have done your fair share of taking out the competition. So this is what Haman had already done. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed and did reverence to Haman, for the king had commanded concerning that. So the king had commanded that everyone would bow their knee to Haman, because he was now second only to the king. But Mordecai did not bow down or do him reverence. I find it very interesting that Mordecai's name means of bitter oppression. That's what Mordecai's name actually means. It means of bitter oppression. And that is indeed the season that the Jewish people would be entering into. So Mordecai wouldn't bow down before him. And the king's servants told him to, and they wouldn't, and he wouldn't, and all of this carried on. And it says, in verse 4, in Esther chapter 3, verse 4, it says, now when they spoke to him day after day and he paid no attention to them, they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's conduct would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. What does that mean? So that means that Mordecai had said to them, similarly to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, similarly to Daniel, Mordecai had said to them, I bow only to my God. I will bow to no other God but mine. I have one God. He is the only God I will bow to. I will not bow to anybody else. So that's why they've now said to, so what they're saying to Haman, the gods are saying to Haman, listen, this guy won't bow to you because he's Jewish and he bows only to his God. Is that okay? So can we let him off? Can that be okay? But when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or do him reverence, he was very angry. But he scorned laying hands only on Mordecai. So since they had told him Mordecai's nationality, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. Okay, I'll just pay attention to that for a second. Mordecai, who is not exactly the wealthiest, he sits at the gates of the, he's just a normal Jewish man. And he only bows to the God of Israel. Now this law is passed that everyone has to bow to Haman. Mordecai refuses to because he only bows to the God of Israel. Just think back to Nebuchadnezzar. Now, or think of Nebuchadnezzar, should I say. Now, here we have one Jewish man refusing to bow to Haman. Okay? If you look at Nebuchadnezzar's case, what did he do? Daniel refused to bow to him, so he threw Daniel into the lion's den. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow to him, so he had them put into the fire. Do you understand that he picked on just those people who wouldn't do what he told them to do? The frightening thing is that obviously everyone else was doing what he told them to do, but we won't worry about that. Haman, he's so angry with Mordecai for not bowing to him that he decides he's going to wipe out an entire nation because Mordecai won't bow to him. An entire nation. Do you see the complete overcompensation within that? I mean, do you see the complete ridiculousness of a situation where somebody can say, I don't like the way that you greet me, I'm going to wipe out your whole nation? And look, we know this has happened in history before. So, I'm not saying it's the only time it's happened. I'm just trying to get you to understand that Haman's hatred was not for Mordecai. Haman's hatred as an Agagite was a centuries deep. It was a cultural hatred for the Jewish people because of what had happened with his people and the Amalekites. You need to remember that in those days, children were raised. There were no books. Children were raised on oral tradition. They were raised on the stories of what had happened to their people previously. So the Agagites, the Amalekites who had become Agagites, from the moment they could understand, their mothers would have told them stories about the Israelites and how the Israelites came in and how they, the Amalekites, were once a mighty people, and the Israelites came in and slaughtered all of their husbands and killed the mothers and killed the children and they would have told that story. They would have told the story of how Saul had let King Agag go and Samuel had chopped his head off. The children in those days, they didn't have books. So they were fed on oral tradition. They were constantly told the stories of their people. And they were constantly told the stories of their people based on their people's perception of what had happened. So the Agagites, they would have been constantly raised on the story of the Israelites as these evil, terrible people who had come in and done an evil, terrible thing. And as with all oral traditions, and as with all historical retellings of stories, the bits where we have done wrong are well weeded out, and eventually it is just that we were these pure, perfect people, and along came this, that is how history tells itself. When we retell, we retell our truth every time, and our truth is not always the truth, no matter which side you're telling it from. Good morning, my Jen. So Haman would have been bred on stories of the Jewish people. He would have been raised on anti-Jewish stories. He would have been born, bred, and raised in anti-Semitism. The Persian people so much, the Jews were in exile in Persia. They'd made lives in Persia. They pretty much were going about their daily business. The Persian people so much weren't bothered with the Jewish people. They were just neighbors. They'd been there long enough to become a part of the landscape. That was not the same for Haman, and he decided that he was going to wipe out an entire nation. So, in the first month, the month of Nisan, do you understand why some Orthodox Jewish people and Messianic Jewish people struggle with the Hebrew civil calendar? Because clearly here in the Bible, in Esther chapter 3, verse 7, it says, in the first month, the month of Nisan, which then means that the first month was the month of Nisan and not the month of Tishri. In the first month, the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Xerxes. Pay attention to numbers in the Bible. 12. Godly government. Haman caused Pur. So the reason why the Jewish people call the event that they celebrate Purim, the reason why they call it Purim is because the word says that Haman caused Pur, and in those days Pur meant lots. So he cast lots because being a superstitious people, being a people who worshipped other gods, they would have cast lots to figure out the best day or the lucky day for his slaughter of the Jews to take place. Okay, so this is where Purim comes from. It comes from the fact that Haman cast lots to decide when to slaughter the Jews. And isn't it interesting, again, that the soldiers cast lots for Jesus' cloak? You know, how God ties up all the loose ends so beautifully in the scripture. So he casts lots, and eventually he finds a lucky day for his venture. Month after month, until the 12th, the month of Adar. Okay, so here we are in the month of Nisan, which is the first month of the year. And now, by means of Haman casting lots, he has come up with the fact that the Jews will be wiped out in the month of Adar, which is the 12th month of the biblical year. So there's a year between these things. So Nisan is the year that Haman makes the decision, but it's going to be a year before it actually happens. And then he goes to the king and he says to the king, you know, that there are these people and their laws are different to your laws and they don't follow along with your laws and all of this kind of thing. And none of that particularly interests the king because they're his subjects and he can crush them at any time. But then he says to the king, if it pleases the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, that it may be brought into the king's treasuries. Do you understand what he did, what Haman did? Basically, he bribed him. He knew exactly what. He knew exactly what King Xerxes was all about. What Xerxes needed was money. Money, money, money. And that all of his prattling about people who didn't maintain all the laws of the country were not going to bother Xerxes too much. There weren't enough of them for him to bother them. But let him put a price on it. Let him say, oh, but you know what? I will give you 10,000 pieces of silver. And King Xerxes' ears pricked up and they were like, oh, now this sounds like a good deal. I mean, who are these people? Do I care about them? They just live in my land. What's the point? What are their lives worth to me? Nothing. How often has it been the case that Jewish lives have been worth nothing to people? Just nothing. So he took his signet ring. Remember we spoke before about the signet ring that carries the authority, and he sealed the letter. And that's saying that this could happen. And once he had sealed that, there was no going back. Not even King Xerxes himself could change what had happened then. That was a law, and it was sent there. And so the king's secretaries were called in on the 13th of Nisan, and they were commanded to take everything that Haman had commanded to every prince, every person, every province, all in their own languages, written in the name of King Xerxes, sealed by the king's signet ring. And it says, and letters were sent by special messengers to all the king's provinces to destroy, to slay, and to do away with all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to seize their belongings as spoil. Now, on the 13th day of Adar, the month of Adar, basically, if your neighbor was a Jew, you were entitled to rise up against him, wipe him out completely, and take everything that is his. So there's an enticement in there for the people, because Haman also knew that there will be people, the Jewish people that lived in Persia for a long time, there would be people, Jews who were friends with Persians, Persians who were friends with Jews. Probably there had been a degree of intermarriage, even though God had said that that shouldn't happen. And Haman knew himself that people wouldn't just be like, okay, we're just going to slaughter our friends on the 13th day of Adar. They needed a little bit of an incentive. And the incentive was to take everything that the Jewish people had. And the Jewish people had done well for themselves, as Jewish people do in most nations around the world. When they move into a nation and they start to trade and they can come into a nation with nothing and have nothing, and they do well for themselves. So their reasoning, or their kind of what a man was saying to them is, you can have it all. Whatever they have, you can have. And their belongings will be yours. And that would have been enough incentive. I'm sure that there were probably people in Persia who were not prepared to rise up against the Jews, but that would have been incentive for a lot of people to actually do that. So that was a good. Sorry, my dog is just growling in the background for some reason. That would have been a good reason for the Jewish people to rise up again. I mean, for the Persians to rise up against the Jewish people. And basically, I think to myself, they had a year. I think about the Russia-Ukraine war, and I see the pictures and the not the false media, but the real things of people fleeing the Ukraine, sending their children ahead, mothers fleeing with their children because their husbands have to stay and fight, and all of those things. And that had to happen over a few days. And I wondered to myself, in Persia, the Jewish people had a year. They knew they had a year before they were going to be wiped out. How must that have felt? Because it's almost, no, I don't want to use the wrong words here, but if somebody says to you, this is happening tomorrow, then you sort of, okay, tomorrow, there's not a lot I can do between, but when you have a whole year, it's now Nisan, and and Adar is going to come, and that your family and your whole nation are going to be slaughtered. What happens for that year? Did people escape? Did people leave Persia? It couldn't have been very easy. The Jewish people had done well for themselves in various places, but I don't know that they did well enough to be immigrating to other nations. And also, not many nations wanted them. They were exiles cast out from their own land. There weren't many nations that would have welcomed in the Jewish people. I just wonder what they would have done for that year while they waited for this hammer to fall, basically. So, but it says at the end of verse 3, it says, the special messengers went out in haste by order of the king, and the decree was given out in Shushan, the capital, and the king and Haman sat down to drink. The king and Haman sat down to drink. But the city of Shushan was perplexed at the strange and alarming decree. Notice it doesn't just say that the Jews in the city of Shushan were perplexed, but the city of Shushan were perplexed. They didn't understand this decree. They didn't understand why this was happening. They were perplexed and alarmed. Like, what is King Xerxes doing? These are people we work alongside. These are people whose shops we go to, who we trade with them. Why suddenly is he deciding this? And there would have been no explanation. There would have just been a decree. So the people of Shushan didn't just go, okay, yay, we're up for it. They were alarmed and perplexed. And then, of course, we know what happened. I must just keep an eye on the time, because we're going to continue with this next week, Tuesday and Thursday, so that we end with the story of Esther on Purim. So Mordecai learned of all this was done, and he rent his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry. And he came and stood before the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, wherever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was a great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. And understand something as well. This is before social media. So this wasn't like somebody tweeted, hey guys, Xerxes is going to slaughter us all in a year's time. Just saying, let's do the sackcloth and the ashes thing. You know, this went out into province after province, no social media, only these letters from the king, but all without a doubt, all of it says there was great mourning among the Jews, for fasting, weeping, wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. And of course, when Esther heard that Mordecai was doing this, she sent orders for people to dress him properly, and he wouldn't receive them. Then she called one of the king's attendants and ordered him to bring Mordecai to her, and Mordecai came to her, and the king's attendant actually went to Mordecai. She couldn't go to Mordecai, and Mordecai told him everything that had happened and the promise of money that had been promised to pay for the king's treasuries for the Jews to be destroyed. And he gave him a copy of the decree that had been sent out to destroy them, and said to this guy, show it to Esther, explain it to her, and charge her to go to the king and plead with him for the lives of her people. Show it to Esther, explain it to her, and charge her to go to the kings and plead for the lives of her people. I think I'm going to stop there this morning. And I'm going to carry on with the rest on Tuesday. But I want to put yourself in Esther's shoes for one moment. She has been taken from everything she knows, taken from the manhood. She's already lost her parents, her whole entire family. She has this one uncle. She has been raised by this one uncle who has loved her, and he has loved her well. She has been ripped away from her life as she knew it, and stuck in this harem of concubines of King Xerxes. For 12 months, she has gone through these purification processes and various things to get her ready for King Xerxes. She goes into King Xerxes. She is chosen. She's the one. She is crowned queen. She takes Vashti's place. If you can imagine the fear that she must have lived in up until that time, the fear that she lived in up until she was crowned queen because of the knowledge of what would happen if she wasn't crowned queen, that she would just spend the rest of her days languishing in the king's harem, and some of the women who were in the king's harem he never called for ever again. I think he just couldn't remember everyone that was in there. And the crown being put on her head, her being crowned, that must have been a moment for her of like, okay, it's going to be okay. I'm queen now. I have, authority. I have a degree of security. I have found favor with Haman. I have found favor with Xerxes. I have found favor with all these people. I'm queen now. It's going to be okay. And probably literally, as she was settling into that life of and allowing that trauma and everything that she had been through to dissipate and to settle, then the next thing, this thing rises up. And Mordecai says, you have got to go to the king and plead for the lives of your people. And you've got to wonder whether she must have thought, isn't it easier to just be queen and be okay? Because remember, nobody knew she was Jewish. Nobody knew. She still hadn't told anybody that she was Jewish. They did not know. They knew she ate a very specific diet, but they did not know she was Jewish. The king, the God had not yet released her to tell them who she actually was. So imagine where she sits now, just when she thought she was on the other side of this horrendous experience. She faces another, potentially even more horrendous experience. And isn't that often what happens with us? We just get to we get to the end of something, or what we think is the end of something, or we've been praying and persevering, pressing in and looking for breakthrough and waiting for this and waiting for that, and the next thing it comes, and we're like, yes, we're here, and it's like we've barely taken a moment to catch our breath and celebrate the breakthrough, and something happens, and we just like, really, Lord, what happened there? But that is life. That is life. And the previous tests are supposed to help you with the tests to come. So you're not starting from the beginning again. So this has happened, and you've worked through this whole thing, and you've reached the end, and you've made it, and you've got breakthrough, and you've got victory, and you're sitting there, and you, yes, Jesus. And then this happens. But you're not starting back from here again. You've already walked through all of this. So you have an advantage now, right? Because you've seen what God has done. So you have an advantage. So this thing rises up and slaps you around the ear hole. And you say, oh no, hang on. God and I have just been through something quite similar here, actually. And I got breakthrough. I got victory. I'm moving on from this place. I'm going ahead with God. And I know that no matter how difficult it is, He goes with me. And I'm going to end off now, but just on a personal note. And I'm not like this every day, ladies, just so that you know. I'm not perfect. And I don't wake up every day with a huge big grin on my face saying, Lord, today's the day. But in the health battles that I've walked through, probably for the last 10 years, but more specifically for the last 4, there have been so many times where I have thought that the answer has been found and I'm going to be okay. And there are so many times when it hasn't been that. When someone has said to me, yes, that is the answer for that. So that is okay. But now we have these things, all that now need to be. So I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to sit on the other side of victory, to sit on the other side of breakthrough, to celebrate a game-changing testimony, which is what I did, a while back in 2020. I celebrated a game-changing health testimony in 2020, and now I sit here at the beginning of 2022, and I start again, but it's different now because I know how God went with me last time. So I know that He will go with me this time. Again, no matter what it looks like, no matter what it feels like, no matter how sick the medication makes me, no matter how tired I am, no matter how scared I sometimes am of what it will look like in 3 months. I know God is with me. That I don't doubt for a second. So, on that, I'm going to love and leave you. But I will see you. Sorry, this is my little clock that I keep time. Otherwise, at 10 o'clock, I'll still be talking to you, ladies. I will see you next week, Tuesday, at 7 a.m. I will not miss that one. I will see you next week, Tuesday, at 7 a.m. And next week, Tuesday and Thursday, we are going to wrap up the story of Esther, and we are going to talk about the celebration of Purim, what the Jewish people do, what that looks like, and yeah. And we are going to praise Jesus and celebrate His love for us and just be so grateful that we get to walk this road with Him, no matter how uncomfortable it could potentially be. So, I love you all. I send the biggest hugest, most enormousest virtual hugs in your direction. And I send the hugest blessings. In fact, I bless your weekend. I bless you with a super abundant, supernaturally filled with joy and health and wealth and wisdom weekend over each and every one of you, in Jesus' name. Amen. Love you all.